welcome everybody. You're here for our virtual tour of the Museum of Northern Arizona Rio de Flag Trail. And I'm holding a map here in my hand. The trail is a whopping half-mile long, but it's a really wonderful chance to get out and do a little walk. I think a lot of us need a walk right now. And it's beautiful and cool. It runs through a lava field that was laid down 6 million years ago. And so we're going to take a walk. We'll do a few stops on the way, and then we'll mostly be down in the canyon, and our emphasis today is plants. And our virtual tour turned into a real tour, so welcome to everybody here. Largest ponderosa pine gamble oak woodlands, and a lot of you who are locals probably know that, but to my right and above my, and it's just leafed out. It waits till it's nice and warm to put its leaves on, and then next to it a ponderosa pine tree. I'm not going to do it, but when you come out for your walk, definitely stick your nose in and get and you can see it's a deciduous plant, which means it didn't have leaves all winter. Now it has these really pretty kind of heart-shaped leaves, and you get a rare treat. You get to see the canyon grape in flower. And so each one of these bunches of flowers here has the potential to become a grape, and canyon grapes taste like Concord grapes. They're a wild American grape, so they're really delicious. Wow. We'll do another stop on the way down. So this little scruffy looking shrub is one we saw earlier if you were in any of our earlier virtual plant walks. This is wax currant, and it's a local shrub. Gets its name wax currant because it's very sticky and incredibly fragrant. If you come and see wax currant, stop, rub the leaves, and give them a smell because they're just delicious. The flowers are faded now, but this plant is one of the first plants to feed the hummingbirds here in the spring. When they first arrive, the little white tubular flowers are just blooming. Now, if you look closely, you can see we're going to have a lot of small currants on this plant. They are edible, and as the name wax currant says, they do taste a little fragrant and waxy, but definitely a great plant for the birds, and if you're hungry enough, you could eat them.
The leaves?
The berries.
The berries.
So it has, so the fruits are a currant. So they're, if you were in Europe, they have currants in markets all the time. For us, you only usually find them in cans and gourmet stores. But
like a kind of like a goji, or a little bit bigger, maybe.
I don't really know gojis, but yeah, it's just a little round berry.
Okay, yeah.
With some seeds.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Or wolfberry.
There are some cacti here, and this is a twisted spine beavertail.
Nopales.
Nopales, huh?
Yeah.
Be our interpreter for nopales and other names you know. This is three-leaf sumac, Rus trilobata. So it's related to all the other members of the sumac family, and people always say, oh, is it poison sumac? It isn't, but if you're sensitive to poison oak or poison ivy, you wouldn't want to be holding it like I am now, because people who are really sensitive can be irritated by it. It's just starting to have small, which is red, very sour, and gives the plant its other name, lemonade berry. And one more, we have a beautiful penstemon here. If you are a little unsteady on your feet out here, you might want to bring your hiking poles. But it's a low on top. It's a riparian area, and riparian areas have the most plant diversity in Arizona. They comprise less than 1% of our plant community in terms of area, and so they're very special and very important to life and biodiversity. Wild iris, and so you can see this whole clump of wild iris. It's called, sometimes known as blue flag, western blue flag, western iris, but it's native to areas where we get water. And you can see it looks a lot like your garden iris, but the flowers are very, very delicate in comparison. This is one of the best butterfly plants around. And if you stay around it long enough in a place like this, you will see butterflies land on it. Looks like we have a painted lady visiting. A lot of times, if you're able to come and be quiet and not create a lot of fuss and just sit and watch, a lot of butterflies will come, and one of the prettiest ones that will come and visit this will be the swallowtail. It's not widely known, but this is one of the main nectar plants beloved by monarch butterflies. And so this can also be considered a plant that would encourage monarchs early in the season in your garden to have something to feast upon the adults as they come to lay their eggs. So that's western blue flag. Likes full sun to bloom, and it likes a lot of water. Well, I guess we could just go this way, huh?
So would this grow down below this altitude?
Yeah, the wild iris will grow down below. You want to, as you get hotter, you need a cooler, wetter place.
Right, okay.
But yes. And then next to it, I don't think we'll see any in bloom today, but I'll point this one out because it's a really pretty plant. And this is called Mountain Banner. It has these three-parted leaves, which will tell you it's in the clover family or pea family. And it has very pretty yellow flowers. So when it's in bloom, you'll find colonies of it frequently growing with the iris, and a lot of yellow flowers. If you know a Texas bluebonnet, it looks just like that, except for they're yellow.
Huh.
Ooh. Well, we're not going to get very far without seeing great things and smelling great things. So this is our wild rose, sometimes known as Arizona rose or woods rose. But if you come down and give this one a sniff, it has very simple 5-petaled pink flowers with yellow centers. Great for bees and butterflies, and it smells just like heaven. Right now, it has some galls on it. These are insect galls. And so adult insects will come and inject the plant with their eggs, and it forms these galls, and then when the insects hatch out, they can eat the plant. And so that's kind of cool. But later on, by fall, what you'll see is that this plant has all of the roses are replaced with beautiful red, tasty, nutritious, vitamin C filled rose hips. So this is a really great plant for rose hips production too, and you can make rose hips tea or rose hips jelly, all kinds of things with this. This is so cool. Well, you can see here the Rio is an ephemeral stream, and it's still wet right now this year. It's got a lot of water this year, which is making it fantastic. Some of the plants that grow close in the moist areas are this vine, and if any of you are home brewers, you might recognize this is a wild hops vine. It dives back to the ground every year and then comes up. It's got these leaves that are reminiscent of a couple of things, one of them being a mulberry, and it's in the Cannabaceae family, but no smoking. It's not a plant to smoke, but it's a wonderful plant. The hops can be used for brewing, and they can also be used for things like sleep pillows. They have this very wonderful smell that will help put you to sleep, especially if you mix it with the petals of the wild rose And if you're going in for non-natives, you could throw in something like lavender to really top off the effect. So when you get tired of sewing masks for the virus, you can switch your sewing operation to making really great sleep pillows and fill them with some of these wonderful native herbs, and that will help you rest easy at night. Okay, I'm going to go to this one, but as a group, if you stay there, that would be good. So we're not going to go on the full nature trail today. We're going to do a loop on it, but their nature trail does continue here to some other places. But I wanted to stop here. This is an axe head or many head groundsel. So it's in the Aster family, meaning it has daisy-like flowers. And all of the groundsels have yellow flowers, and then the little bracts that surround the flowers all have even, narrow, little leafy leaves on them, leaf petals, and they look like a little picket fence. So that's always an easy one. And the groundsels, or senecio as the scientific name calls, are really early to come up. So when you're out hiking right now, just about wherever you go, you will probably find some kind of groundsel or the other. Juncus or rush. So it has a very stiff, totally rounded cylindrical stem, and you can see some of them get quite an interesting zigzag on them. They're referred to as grass-like plants, but they're not in the grass family. They're very different. And we'll also see, if we're lucky down here, different kinds of horsetails and sedges. And these are other plants that like to be wet and can look a lot like a grass. I always have heard the saying, sedges have edges. And if you rub the stems in your hands, they're frequently cylindrical, so they'll catch as you try to roll them. They also come out in 3 ranks, so they're kind of whorled, and so they come out, all the parts come out in 3s, whereas if it was a grass, they would come out in 2s. And then they have different flowering formations on the tip. And if you could see with a magnifying glass, you would see that the seeds on these are in a little, each seed is in a little leather-like pouch. And so that's one of the ways you can tell a sedge. And they also have bristles and things on them. But yes, they have these strange little bags that hold the seeds. So this slopes here is really pretty. And one thing you'll see is the bright green color is the sedge. Around it, we have a fern-like plant, and we'll probably get close up to that later on, but it's called meadow rue. Looks a lot like a maidenhair fern, but doesn't need all the moisture, so it's a good choice if you have a shady place in your backyard. It's related to columbines, but its flowers are very simple. They lack petals, and so they lack petals and spurs and all of the parts that make columbines so showy, but the foliage itself is really beautiful. Okay, I wanted to get to a patch of tall, beautiful willows. A lot of our willows definitely have just started coming out for the winter and need a little dead wood removal to make them fire safe. But at this point in time, most of the canyon is filled with this native willow. It's called Arroyo Willow, or Salix lasiolepis. And it grows directly in the water and in moist soil around the water. It's shade intolerant, so it needs to be in a place that has regular daytime sun. Early in the season, it has really small flowers, male and female, and here you can see the female flowers have formed seeds which look like little bits of cotton, and those will blow away on the wind or wash downstream. Frequently, as you can see from the thicket here, these plants will reproduce off the roots and spread by underground rhizomes. But they do have the ability to spread by seed as long as the seed lands in moist sand or a nice moist place. If the seed, once the seed leaves the plant, it will frequently die within 24 hours if it hasn't found a wet home. A lot of the plants that grow here do have these underground roots that spread, and so you can see you'll have a huge grouping, almost a ground cover of different plants. This one doesn't look like much right now, but if you fix it in your mind later on, what you'll do is see that this goldenrod, which blooms in late summer and into fall, has really pretty big bursts of yellow flowers at the end. So you can see something like this could be quite spectacular once every stem gets yellow flowers. It's a great one for birds and butterflies and bees, and particularly late in the season when a lot of our plants aren't blooming anymore, it will give bees and things forage. More irises. There is a super pretty Arizona rose. And you can see if you look up the canyon wall, there are a whole lot of the wax currant we saw earlier. These are looking a little lusher than what we saw. Everything here is positioned in the rocks, and so it can get a whole lot of water. And so the plants, between being shaded part of the day and getting all the water collected from the rocks, are a lot lusher than the ones we saw when we first started out. This is an interesting combination because we have a Beavertail cactus, which we think of as liking it dry, growing here with smooth rushes, which we think of as growing in wet places, and in fact they only do. So what this shows is a lot of water comes down the slope, and due to the rocks, the cactus probably doesn't have its feet soaking in moist soil. These are fantastic. They're all full of silica. They're a primitive plant, so in the days of the dinosaurs, these plants would have been there. They're an early plant, so kind of dinosaur food. And I know that when we use them, camping, we would always use them because with the silica in the stems, you can use them to scrub pots and pans. They have a lot of abrasive quality. So that's a plant. If you see that, it means you're in a place that is very wet a whole lot of the time. Well, this is definitely a place to pause, I think, because here you can see the wild hops and this log, and that's about as pretty as it gets. Sometimes you'll find the wild hops like this sprawling on the ground. Sometimes it'll grow all the way up into trees, and you'll see it going up 20, 30 feet high into a tree, but it's always beautiful wherever it is. If you want to plant them in your gardens, the thing about hops is that you need both male and female plants to get the hops. And so you want to make sure you get both of them, which they have to be in bloom for you to tell. Oh, there's one going up. here you can see the wild rose. It's such a thicket former. And so when you're out hiking, etc., frequently you can find yourself enmeshed in the rose. Wherever you are, when you see it, you know that there's some extra moisture being collected. So even if you're in a dry location, it means it likes moisture. And it's definitely just a huge thicket former. Yeah. So if you plant it in your home, be careful, because you can't just have one wild Arizona rose. That is definitely very ambitious, takes over things, and one of the ways you can always recognize it is it has almost square stems, very, very rough stems. If you rub your hands along it, it's like sandpaper or maybe a wild boar.
What is this again?
This is once again the hops.
The hop.
The hops. And it is definitely one of the dominant plants down here.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, here is our next plant, and this is a horsetail. So horsetails will usually show you're in very wet locations, and they're related to the scouring rushes we saw. So for instance, here's the scouring rush, here's the horsetail. So they're both called Equisetum. That's the genus, but you can see that the horsetail, instead of having a long, almost leafless stalk, has leaves coming out in a whorl all around it, which is why it has its name, horsetail. We're down here, and there is water running below us right now, which is pretty neat. And so you can see it's super wet. Another of the natives that grows locally here naturally in these wet areas around the museum looks like a little wild hollyhock, and it's called New Mexico checker bloom or alkali checker bloom. I don't think we're going to see flowers today, but if you come later on, you'll see it has these palmate leaves with little glandular hairs on it that shine in the sun. And then on the bottom, the stem attaches, there's a little whorl of something red there where it attaches on. But pretty soon these will have pink to lavender flowers, and they'll look like miniature hollyhock stems. These are some really nice horse scouring rushes here with the seed pods on the end. So now we're on the home stretch of the trail coming back towards the top. You can see that the grapes we saw up top are very bountiful. Down here, they don't have as many flowers on them, and frequently the wild grapes bloom better and produce fruit in the sun. If they're in the shade, then you usually don't get as many flowers or any fruit on them. One of the things about grapes is people will say, I have grapes, why don't they make any fruit? And I've run into this a lot in life. And the reason is that grapes, these and cultivated grapes, will bloom and produce fruit on their second year growth. And so if you're in a situation where each year you cut things back to the ground or they freeze back, then your grapes might never get in a position to produce fruit. But given water and sun, these should definitely have some tasty grapes. One of the nice things on the nature trail, especially, is how quiet it usually is, how you can have some time here just to look at amazing things. And so this big hunk of basalt has a lot of little gardens growing on it. Here it has an aster, a little macaranthera with these pinnate, feathery gray leaves. This will have little purple and yellow daisy flowers on it soon, and it even has some native grasses growing up in the cracks. And it looks like here we've got another sedge. This one doesn't have any seed heads or flowers on it yet, but if you look, it's a lot taller than our first sedge was, a lot more coarse texture, and a very, very bright green color. So you can almost always, when you're going around in an area like this or even in the forest, tell the sedges from the grasses from this really bright yellow-green color. Okay, well, here we get to the poison ivy section, or the poison oak section, I think is more appropriate. So anyway, if you have heard the old adage, leaflets 3, let it be, this is our friend poison ivy, and it has 3 very shiny leaflets. It's related to the sumac we saw earlier, but very strong and is able to give most of us a pretty serious skin rash. So the one precaution when you come down to the trail is learn what poison ivy looks like and don't touch it. And if you have children and things, tell them that too. It's quite pretty. You can see if you want to get close enough to look underneath. It has a lot of little white flowers along the stems hidden under the leaves. And those will be followed by white berries that you don't want to eat. Here we've cut it back off the path, but we just want you to recognize it. It's funny because I go hiking with people all the time, and for some reason they all know poison ivy from the east or poison oak from California in the west, but for some reason everyone says, oh, that doesn't look like that. And so it's really good to acquaint yourself with it before you go out hiking, particularly any place like this canyon that's cool and moist. Well, this is just a pretty rock, so I think we'll stop here at this little garden and enjoy. There's just so many things to see down here. We skipped a few things. There's a few surprises for you, and definitely a chance for you to explore yourself. So I hope you can all come on down here and get out and see the plants. We're open now with masks and social distancing, but we're definitely welcome to come down here and gently use the canyon. Before we go, I think there's some little fleabane with the little white daisy-like petals. And that's another thing in the Aster family. All the fleabanes have tiny, tiny narrow petals, usually clustered together with square tips and really pretty yellow centers. So on behalf of the museum, thanks for coming on our walk.